Peace and love, everybody. Peace and love. Something came to my attention as of late, and I wanted to speak a little bit about just the matter of dissension that I find to be permeating a bit between Devin and Mayweather, and just touching into some points about the root of it, but just really speaking about how weird and insidious the role that Mayweather plays in all of this can be, or at least seeks to be, from what it appears to me. And I'm definitely not the only one, of course, who has observed this. It's kind of been spoken about a little bit about Mayweather. It's actually one of the things that people find to be very annoying about Mayweather is kind of his insistence to impose himself, just in general, into always an area of spotlight, always an area of a sense of wanting to be the forefront, or in this case, he's not necessarily at the forefront, but the strings that he's pulling as a puppeteer certainly make him the head of much of the dissent and confusion that we could account for, as far as, and particularly relating to the young King Devin Haney. I can't help but take heed and take some notice to some of these quite disturbing aspects of the relationship between Floyd and Devin Haney. It was actually brought to my attention by one of the lovely kings who is subscribed to my channel. Shout out to the beautiful King Daryl Anderson. Peace to you, King. Okay, this gentleman is always very clear and logical in his observations. In my recent commentary that I did, the previous one, about where I was talking about the excuses that Ryan seemed to be attempting to make, and all of that with the fight, trying to, possibly use Vegas as an excuse to pull out of the fight. Daryl mentioned, this may be an attempt of Ryan looking for an out, but it may likely be due to Floyd and TMT. And upon looking into it and marinating on that a bit, it would be hard to dispute that notion. In fact, I've heard in passing a few perspectives touching on this, actually, and one of them happened to be from the great King BFTB, and also touched upon by the mighty King 7-8 Sports, who has also touched on this aspect, but somehow, I don't know, it managed to escape me. And I've heard it before, and I'm very familiar with the pervading discussion surrounding Floyd and his imposition, as far as the scope of things, and kind of, a hidden, unspoken of treachery that he wants to set out to showcase against Devin. So I'm definitely familiar with it. So I don't know how, I kind of didn't look too deep into it as far as Ryan is concerned. But yeah, let's get into it a little bit. So, it's quite obvious the amount of significance and influence that Floyd has on Ryan, and particularly as of late, right? Particularly as of the last few months. They've been seen together at events and basketball motherfucking shows and sit in front rows and Ryan has accredited Floyd, as being a mentor of his on his social media platforms, as somebody that he respects fully. So Floyd is definitely whining and dining this young man. Okay, he is definitely, he is definitely cajoling, right? He's definitely keeping him close. But keeping him close, as one would do with a card in the deck, right? And it's not surprising that this quote unquote closeness comes at the point where Devin and Ryan have been negotiating a fight and have now solidified and concretized that fight, right? That is taking place, as we know, on April 20th. So what I wanted to divulge today is the bizarre way in which this big brother, OG persona that Floyd has with these fighters can play as a facade, as spoken about by the great King 78 and also BF and all the other people who have noticed this as well. So the facade of this big brother OG demeanor that kind of gets tossed around, by Floyd, by seemingly being available to take these young fighters under the wing, so to speak, right? So there are many layers and dimensions to this that I don't know, if we could cover them all today, of course, but a few points of significance and of note to me is, firstly, that I can clearly see where the strings are being pulled by Floyd. All right? He is a man who works solely, if we're going to keep it a buck, he is a man who works solely in and for his own interests. Okay? I do not for one moment doubt that he loves the game. That I don't doubt. But I do doubt that all of the big brotherly mentoring parading about has anything to do with anything outside of himself. That is to say that Floyd is very Floyd-centric, if we want to put it in those terms. He's very centered around himself, okay? And so anything that is surrounding that, as long as it's suited to that self, then he works within that because it is satisfying the centrality of himself in these endeavors that he finds himself among and oftentimes controlling. Right? And, and I hate to say that because I really rocks with Floyd. I've been, it goes without saying. We don't even need to say that. But, Floyd is, that's TBE. He's done his thing and he's earned his stripes and, is a very significant player. Historically, as far as boxing is concerned, and he is revered and will always be remembered for that. But, the moves are shaky. Okay, on myriad levels, to keep it a buck, when one dives deeper into the analysis of the several moves over the several terms and levels that it's been happening on for quite some time now. It's definitely not new. So, the interesting thing is that Floyd has had his hand in the cookie jar of all of these young men at 135. Devin, Shakur, right? He had vested interest there. Tank, of course, who is his fighter. And now Ryan Garcia. And it seems like all of this politicking is for the purpose of keeping certain pieces off or on the chessboard at his will. Okay? So, actually, speaking of the great BFTB, the great King, he mentioned in one of his recent podcasts that Leonard Ellerbe had interjected himself into, one of the posts that Ryan made where he was vouching for the fight with Devin to take place in Vegas instead of BS and all that nonsense of him trying to be wishy-washy and complaining about the fight in BK, right? I saw the post. I saw the post, and in this tweet that Leonard chimed in on, uninvitedly, by the way. Nobody motherfucking added him. It's just, here he goes, interjecting. Nobody asked you to be here. Nobody tagged you in the post. Here you go. You just was clocking, keeping your claws on, Ryan. And here you go, feeling, as free as ever to interject. And not only did he interject, but he said something very interesting, very weird, right? He said something to the effect that, this is why we don't like to rush. This is why we don't like to announce fights prematurely, basically, because things get mystified and all types of whatever. Look, do you see the posturing of that? This is why we. Excuse me, sir. The last time I checked, Ryan Garcia was a golden boy fighter. Who the fuck is we? This is why we don't XYZ. What? I just, that's very, very bizarre. We? How are you even inserted in this conversation? We? What do you have anything to do with the business ventures of Ryan Garcia all of a sudden, right? So already we can see the interplay, the interloping that is woven apparently into the fabric and into the matters of Ryan Garcia from the TMT side, which is very, very, very interesting. Okay. Now, Floyd has been exhibiting some very strange behavior as it pertains to Devin. Okay. So, though this man has taken Devin, because this is definitely imperative to note. Though this man has taken Devin under his wing since childhood, raised him basically in his gym, right? The doghouse. Although Devin has passed through the hands of Floyd Sr., Roger Mayweather, right? There's a peculiar assertion that Floyd seems to be seeking to detract from Devin's mobility in the sport. He seems as if he wants to present some inkling of a limitation, right? In whatever way that he can. He just wants to posit any type of subliminal, subtle, barricade or blockade along the path of Devin Haney. That's what it seems. Okay, I got to keep it a stack about that. And it seems like, he'll do that by whatever means. If he could play devil's advocate, and whisper a little something in the ear of dissent into Ryan, if he could whisper, or pass off a little assertion to Shakur Stevenson, whatever it is, he'll opt to do it as long as it could, lean toward the hindrance of Devin's moves and motives at some point. Like planting the seeds, it seems to me. And I do not for the life of me understand why this man, I just don't get it. Why this man, who has seen this young king from boyhood to manhood, want to stifle, hinder, or stultify his progression. It's just, it's not something I can wrap my head around. How and why? But we'll get into how and why in a moment. So the question is basically, what is the reason for the ulterior motives? Where is it coming from, right? And it makes you wonder, if it's because of jealousy, right? That's one of the possible reasons, right? It's no secret that Floyd continues to think of himself as the face of boxing. He says it all the time. I'm still the face of boxing. It's me. As a complete disrespect to his fighter, who is supposed to be the face of boxing, as a complete disrespect to the person that he's supposed to be building up and toting up, he's still at the forefront, which is, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest things that all of the boxing community have noticed about Floyd Mayweather, and that many people find to be one of the biggest attributes of annoyance that they could accredit to this man for always trying to center himself, even to this day, as the face of boxing. But anyway, as him taking that stance and doing that, I think it's because it's a very real possibility that Devin will trump that, because he's certainly well on his way to doing it. Now, Floyd is definitely a vain ass motherfucker. Okay, let's just keep it a buck. Floyd is vain, and that's saying it nicely. He loves to see his own reflection. And this may be part and parcel to why he has his hand, or has had his hand, on the shoulders of many of these young men, because he wants to, in some way, input, assert something of himself, some type of input, some type of say, some type of mold of himself. He wants to insert that so that he can continue in the sport, even where it isn't physically possible for him to do that anymore because of his age, right? He wants to posit some type of notion. He wants to have an imprint of himself made in these young men, or around these young men, so that he can remain a focal point, a center of attention on some level. Right? So the OG big brother, facade comes as a means to cloak the intention of the insertion of himself, so that he can have a control of something still in the game as it relates to currently, even though he's not necessarily a major player in the game as far as the people on the battlefield. He still wants to be accredited for, at least the type of, the contribution to that greatness that is present currently, even though he's not a player within it, so to speak. So what's also interesting to me is that Devin is a savage, right? Devin is a whole beast. He's a beast of a man, beast of a warrior, okay? But he's quite a graceful young man, okay? And in that, I mean, he hasn't said anything about the detractions or the interjections of Floyd. I've heard him say nothing about it. I've never heard him allude to it. I've never heard him, go off on any type of tangent about it, but I'm sure he must be aware. Okay. If I'm aware, he got to be aware, and I'm not even, in that life per se. So I'm sure he's aware. He's expressed nothing but respect and given nothing but credit, to what he has learned from the Mayweather family as a whole for all these years that he's been with them. He's been nothing but gracious, for the knowledge that they've imparted to him. And, it's very disconcerting that there would be even an inkling of an agenda to satisfy or distort such a promising, excellent young champion. I just, Floyd, he really trips me out with that. There's just no wrapping a mentality around it at all. So Floyd is the what I call the guardian. Floyd is the guardian and the custodian of Tank Davis, right? So of course, he's going to have a vested interest in seeing his guy reign as number one in the sport, by whatever means that he needs to do that. Okay, and the interesting thing is that even though Dev was suffused with the Mayweather family's knowledge and history and tactics and all types of things, Tank is still Floyd's fighter, okay? And Devin and Tank are each other's arch nemesis. That's what they are for each other. They are the number one competition to each other. So with that, there is bound to be a clash and conflict of interest as far as Floyd is concerned. However, I do believe that a bit of grace goes a long way on the part of Floyd. But at the same time, this is the art of war nonetheless. So I don't know, as it relates to Tank, I could see why he would abandon the notion of closeness with Devin. But what I do not subscribe to is him setting up, let's say, traps with a whole nother fighter. And I'm referring to Ryan here with this whole, closeness and hand in hand and frolicking among the daisies together, with Ryan Garcia, setting up, means for that closeness as a way to try to foster the dismantling of the fight with Devin Haney. Are you trying to superimpose, you know what I'm saying? Which a lot of speculation about that is going around, that, your supposed closeness with Ryan all of a sudden is to really, set up a trap that would cause a displacement, of Ryan from the fight, so that it could pose a threat to the fight actually commencing with Devin Haney, which is very, very interesting because if you think about it, when Ryan loses to Devin Haney, because that is absolutely what is going to take place, Devin Haney will, without a doubt, outshine Tank. And by that I mean, so far, Ryan is the most well-known name on Tank's resume, right? He's not the most skilled, but he is the most prominent name on Tank's resume as far as popularity, right? As far as generating interest and buzz and, followers and all of that. Ryan Garcia is the most notable, popular fighter that he has faced. Okay, so when Devin demolishes Ryan Garcia, listen to this closely now. When Devin demolishes him, he not only destroyed the most notable name on Tank's resume, but he will also manage to do that while having beat, in addition to Ryan, right? But he would have also beat one of the biggest names in all of boxing by beating and having conquered Lomachenko. And Lomachenko is a man who Tank has been ducking for something like 6 years. Okay? So that's a huge move on the chessboard as far as Devin is concerned. Okay? He would have beaten the biggest name that he's faced, and then he would have also taken down the man that Tank has been ducking for all of these years. So it's significant, okay? And so we can clearly see where Mayweather could have been pensive about this, right? Where he could have been thinking up a way to, devise a means to distort and cause some type of disorder to shake up the inevitable, which is Devin Haney's success against Ryan Garcia, but real talk, I'm not liking the snakery of it. The snakery is what, I don't really fuck with too much, but, this goes back to the superimposition that I think he has to protect Tank, but ultimately, because Tank is his, this is really a means to protect his own ego and what he managed to stake claim to through Tank Davis, right? Which is a working reflection of himself, right? So vanity is suffusing and permeating all through this activity. It's nothing short of vanity, either way you want to look at it, right? But, the crazy thing, the good thing, I guess, is that Devin seems, despite it all, he seems really unfazed by it. And I must say that because he is taking that approach, then so am I, right? As a supporter of his, I'm also taking that stance. So it's interesting that with all the attempts and the back talking and the insidious intertappings and the traps and the, subtle hints of, disparaging motives, all of that has done nothing to stop the flow and the rise of Devin Haney, which is wonderful to see. He's a young master at what he does, and he'll continue to claim his territory. So, they say heavy lies the head that wears the crown. You got all types of inner workings, you know, in the background, in the underground, working to sabotage one's progress. But, you know, when you are made for this, you know, you defeat and trample over all the obstacles. And I think Devin Haney is definitely clear on his way to continuing to do that. So, yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit of that perspective. I think it's certainly interesting, Floyd Mayweather, as one of the GOATs. I think that he's taking an interesting position if this is the case, of some form of jealousy or at least some type of vanity or whatever the case is. I don't necessarily agree with it at all, but it's definitely interesting to watch against the background of, a champion mindset. Floyd Mayweather isn't above anything just because he's TBE and because he's accomplished some great things in the sport of boxing. It doesn't mean that he is without his own limitations and his own biases and his own motives. But it's also interesting to see the outset and how that works up against a champion mentality and a grace that Devin Haney has been showcasing. So, we'll see how it unfolds. He's definitely not fazed by it, and I definitely support his stance. He's clear on his path, and he's not letting anything get in the way of that. And I can't wait even further for him to demolish Ryan Garcia and get him the fuck out of here, because it's going to send the biggest fuck you to Mayweather and every other detractor that may be lurking around the corners against Devin Haney. So we'll see what happens, you guys. On to the next. Peace.